Imagine you have just taken the throne after the time of troubles. Your signature is law, tax, and a new truth. And suddenly, an inconvenient fact arises. Throughout the country, there exists a parallel chronicle, an oral one. It is not kept in books. It is sung for hours under the Gusli. The elders know it, and the children absorb it. And it describes a world where the people do not remain silent and do not live by decree. As long as these songs are sung, the people have a memory of another order, of will, of the vetch, of the times before you. And memory always gives rise to comparison, and comparison to disobedience. What will you choose? To leave the people with songs in which they are free, or to deprive them of the language of memory, so they more easily accept the chain called law? Now let's see how this looked in real history. Imagine the year 1648. Early spring. Bonfires are simultaneously blazing across the vast country. In Belgorod, in Kostroma, in Dimitrov, in Kashin, in dozens of other towns and districts. Smoke rises to the sky in columns. But in these bonfires, they are not burning witches, not heretics, not sorcerers. Musical instruments are burning. Hulusi, domras, hoots, reeds. Everything that sounded and sang. Everything that delighted the people at holidays and gatherings. The royal decree leaves no room for interpretation. The text is strict and specific. Those devilish musical vessels must be sought out, confiscated, and committed to the fire. The voivodes are ordered to act swiftly and ruthlessly. And this is what is most striking. The documents state in black and white, carts were burned with them. Read this word carefully. Carts. Not bags, not baskets. Not a few items collected from one jester. Whole carts loaded to the brim with musical instruments. The wood cracks in the fire. The strings snap from the heat. The resonators burst. Ash rises up. Stop for a second and try to imagine the scale. Count it yourself. One ordinary peasant cart holds at least 203 medium-sized tools. If you pack carefully and tightly, you can fit even more. The Gusli is not a small item. Its length is about half a meter, width the size of 5 palms. The domra takes up space. You can't fold a long-necked horn in half. Plural. This means that we are talking about thousands of instruments in every city, throughout the country. If you sum it up, it comes to tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. Where does such an incredible quantity come from? Who made them all? Who played on them? Let's understand the craft. The Gusli were made from a special resonant wood. Most often, spruce or maple was used. But not just any kind. The wood was chosen meticulously. The master would go to the forest and search for the right one. The trunk had to be straight, without knots, without cracks. The wood was dense but not heavy. Ringing. The cut tree was not put into work right away. It was dried. At least 3 years. Some craftsmen kept the blanks for 5 years. Any carpenter knows a simple truth. The wood must rest, otherwise it will warp. The tools will warp. The strings will begin to rattle. The sound will be dead, dull, unpleasant to the ear. It took a month of work for an experienced carver to make one instrument. It's not just about hollowing out the body with an axe. One needs to calculate the thickness of the walls, adjust the deck to resonate correctly, cut out the tuning mechanism for the strings. Strings were made from animal intestines, sheep or cow. They were soaked, twisted, and dried under a certain tension. The process took weeks. Metal strings were more expensive and not available to everyone. They were forged from iron or copper, achieving the desired thickness and elasticity. Each string is tuned separately. The tuning holds only if the instrument is made perfectly. The slightest distortion of the body, and the Gusli goes out of tune in a day, a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Now just multiply the figures. Tens of thousands of tools mean not just a pile of wood. These are years of labor from thousands of craftsmen. This means there were entire workshops, guilds of carvers, studios that operated continuously. They did not stand idle. They had demand. Colossal, inexhaustible demand. Demand arises only when the product is needed by everyone. The instruments were in every home, among the peasants, among the townspeople, among the warriors, among the merchants, among all who could afford it. And many could afford it because the Gusli were made not only for the rich. There were simple ones, there were richly decorated ones, but everyone played. This is not the outskirts of culture. This is its center. Music sounded constantly. At holidays, at weddings, at funerals, at communal gatherings, at feasts of the princes, in the peasants' huts, everywhere. And this powerful, lively, vigorous center of culture begins to be scorched, methodically, across the entire country, as if on command. The strangest and most frightening part begins next. This operation is not taking place in one city, not in two. The letters are being sent out simultaneously across the entire country. Belgorod in the south, Dmitrov near Moscow, Kostroma on the Volga, Kashin in the Tver lands, Ryazan in the east, Tyumen in Siberia. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of cities and districts. The text of the letters is absolutely identical, word for word, phrase for phrase. It is as if someone copied one document and sent copies everywhere. But we are talking about the year 1648. No printers, no photocopiers. Each letter was handwritten by the clerks in the office. Quill, ink, parchment, or paper. Yet the same text resulted, by a single rigid template. This is not a spontaneous struggle of a local voivode with drunk dancers. This is not the self-initiative of a single archimandrite who was offended by the noisy buffoons. This is a planned operation. Someone in the center in Moscow developed a plan, wrote a single text, sent it out to all the cities, launched the machine of destruction. Let's think about logistics. In 1648, there is no telegraph, there are no phones, there is no radio. Communication is only through messengers on horseback. It takes a week to ride from Moscow to Belgorod if the weather is good and the roads are dry. It takes about 5 days to Kostroma. To Tyumen, it takes several months of travel. In winter, the roads are covered with snow. In spring, they turn into impassable mud. In summer, you can travel by rivers, but that is also not fast. But the operation is launched synchronously. Everywhere at once, the voivodes receive the order. Everywhere at once, they begin to catch the buffoons. Everywhere at once, they seize the instruments. It's as if someone pressed a button and a single mechanism was triggered across the country. Thousands of versts, different climatic zones, different local conditions, but everywhere there is one algorithm. Someone planned this very carefully. Someone understood the scale of the task. Someone coordinated actions across the territory of a huge country. This is not a struggle against paganism at a local level. This is a state program, centralized, controlled from one center, with clear deadlines, with accountability. The official version is pronounced with a serious demeanor. The authorities claim to have fought against the remnants of paganism, against the remnants of a dark past, against pagan rites that needed to be eradicated for the triumph of the Christian faith. It sounds reasonable and logical, but there is one problem. The documents tell a completely different story. Open the decree of Alexei Mikhailovich in Belgorod. Read it carefully, without skimming. It is written in black and white, without ambiguity. In Belgorod and in other cities and districts, people do not go to God's churches on Sundays and on the days of great saints. They do not go often. They do not occasionally miss the service. They do not go at all. Read this carefully. Sunday, the main day of the Christian week, a day when every Orthodox Christian must attend the liturgy, a mandatory day. And what does the people do? They completely ignore the church. They don't even enter out of decency. And where are they all? The next line of the charter answers this question. In the streets, in the squares, with the jesters, with music, with dances, with round dances, with games and merriment, in whole communities, with everyone. The church stands empty. The priests serve the liturgy for the empty walls. And outside, the entire city is celebrating. The horns are playing. The Guslis are ringing. The people are singing. 600 years after the alleged baptism of Rus, after 6 centuries of Christianization, baptisms, church building, sermons, threats of hell, and promises of paradise. And what is the result? The people stubbornly, demonstratively ignore the temples and continue to live by their customs, by those passed down from grandfathers and great-grandfathers, by those in which the church sees devilry. What are these remnants if they are the foundation of life? If every Sunday the entire community gathers not in the church, but outdoors? If the people prefer Gusli and round dances to prayers and icons? If the priests despairingly complain that their flock has scattered from them? The most obvious explanation sounds like this. The authorities were simply fighting against drunkenness and debauchery. This is how it is written in the charters. They say that the people are indulging in revelry and disorder. Order needs to be restored. People need to be made to behave piously. Okay. Then answer one question. Why are musical instruments being burned specifically? The logic is simple. If the problem is drunkenness, ban the sale of vodka. Introduce state monopoly. Close the taverns. Establish severe punishments for drunken brawls. But what do Gusli have to do with it? If the problem is debauchery, tighten morals, introduce punishments. The church knows how to fight sin through repentance and penances. But why destroy what has been created by the hands of skilled masters? What is passed down from generation to generation? The answer lies not in the tools themselves. The answer lies in who played them. Open the Bilina. Not those retellings for children printed by modern publishers, but the real texts, the old records, those collected by ethnographers in the 19th century from remote villages where they still remembered. Just list the names of the legendary guslars. Dobrinja Nikitic. Do you remember him? The second most significant bogatyr after Ilya Muromets. The voivode of Prince Vladimir, a warrior whose name has become a legend. And he played the gusli. There are many plots in the Bilinas where Dobrinja takes the gusli and sings. Alyosha Popovich, the youngest of the trio of great heroes. Cunning, brave, daring. The conqueror of Tugarin the Serpent, also a guslar. Stavr Godinovich, a hero and a boyar. In the Bilini about him, an entire plot revolves around playing the gusli. Dunai Ivanovich, a warrior whose tragic story is recorded in several versions. Churilo Plenkovich, a handsome hero, a favorite of women. Solovey Budimirovich, a sea hero whose ships plowed the seas. And of course, Sadko, the most famous guslar of all the Bilini. He is the only one who is not a pure warrior but a merchant. Yet even Sadko becomes a naval commander, the ataman of the group. Do you see a pattern? They are all warriors. They are all bogatyrs. The gusli is not an instrument of beggars. It is not a pastime for wandering jesters. It is the instrument of the warrior class, the very one that defended the land, that made decisions at the Vech, that wielded weapons and freedom. Warriors did not just fight and kill enemies. They sang. They told stories. They transmitted knowledge through songs. They were carriers of culture, guardians of the memory of the people. The gusli in the hands of the hero is not a toy. It is a tool of power over minds. And now let's remember another gusli player, from a completely different tradition. King David from the Old Testament. He is also a warrior. We recall the battle of David with Goliath, the young shepherd who defeated the giant with a stone from his sling. He later became a great king, and he too played the gusli, sang psalms, praised God through music. On the walls of churches of the so-called pre-Mongol period, a guslar is depicted. Historians confidently tell us that this is David, the biblical king, a warrior, a guslar. The tradition of playing the gusli was considered so important that it was depicted in stone, on the walls of the church, as a model to imitate. But then the question arises, why does the church destroy the instrument of the biblical king after 400 years? Why is a guslar depicted with honors on the 12th century churches, while in the 17th century they burn them and whip those who play? What has changed? Who came to power? Historians usually say this: gusli were used for church needs, for the glorification of God. And then the people distorted their purpose and began to play pagan melodies. Okay, then why are they called demonic in the documents? Why is there no mention of needing to correct the repertoire, to teach people to sing psalms instead of pagan songs? Why destroy the instrument itself? Why ban it completely, totally, unconditionally? It's not about the instrument itself. It's about who played it. People didn't just dance and have fun to the Gusli. They sang to the Gusli. And what they sang is the key point. Bilinas, oral tales about heroes,
about free times, about how ancestors lived.
These stories were not written down in books. They were passed from mouth to mouth, from grandfather to grandson, from storyteller to disciple, accompanied by Gusli. This was oral history, a living book of the past. It existed parallel to the ecclesiastical written history. Open these bylines. Look closely at the world they describe. There are no tyrant princes. There are no oppressive boyars. There is no serfdom. The heroes are free. They serve the prince of their own free will, not under compulsion. They can leave the prince if he acts unjustly. They can refuse to serve. The Vecha gathers and decides important matters. The people vote. The people have the right to vote. Communities live by their own laws, by their own truth. It is not the boyar council in closed chambers that makes decisions, but the Vecha in the square, openly, transparently, with the whole community. This is not tales. This is codes. Through songs, information was conveyed about how it was before, how ancestors lived before the arrival of the new power, before the Romanovs, before the church dictatorship, before serfdom. The people knew that it was different, that they were free, that the land belonged to those who worked on it, that warriors protected, not oppressed. Storytellers studied for years. One epic cycle took 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours of continuous singing. This is not a 5-minute amusement. This is the transmission of an enormous amount of information, historical knowledge, cultural codes. The young listened to the elders and memorized, word for word, melody for melody. Then they themselves became keepers. They taught the next generation. The chain was not broken. Now imagine the situation. You need to destroy the people's knowledge of the past, rewrite history, instill a new version of events, convince people that they have always been slaves, that it has been this way since time immemorial, that freedom is a sin, that the times of liberty are a myth. What will you do first? Right. Destroy those who pass on old knowledge. Prohibit singing what they have sung for centuries. Break the chain of transmission. And then introduce new songs, new stories, new heroes. Where the people have always been submissive, where the Tsar is God's anointed, where the church is the only source of truth. If a people have songs about freedom, about heroes who lived without masters, can this people be enslaved? They will compare. They will demand to return what was. They will rebel because they know that everything was different before. Knowledge is a weapon of resistance. Therefore, first it is necessary to erase knowledge, to uproot it, to kill those who remember, and only then to put chains on those who have forgotten. And the power understood this perfectly. Therefore, they destroyed not only tools, they destroyed people, bearers of memory. The document clearly states, to beat the buffoons with whips mercilessly and to exile them to Ukrainian cities. Ukrainian means the borderlands, the frontier territories, the wild field, places from which few returned. They were not just driven out of the city in disgrace. They were publicly beaten. Bones were broken. They were maimed, and then sent to the border, under the raids of the nomads. The voyevodas reported to Moscow on the number of captured individuals. In the reports, they specified, so many instruments confiscated, so many people punished. There was a quota, a standard. If the voyevoda did not meet the plan, he himself could be punished for negligence. The system worked efficiently, like a machine. This was a physical cleansing, the destruction of the cultural layer of the population, those who kept the knowledge, those who could sing of another past. Without them, the knowledge was cut off. The youth remained without teachers. There was no one to pass on the epic tales. There was no one to teach how to play. Tradition died with the last bearers. The archimandrite from Kashin writes a desperate petition to the Tsar, dated 1648. He complains that on the first day of Great Lent, the whole town dances with jesters. The entire town. Not a bunch of drunkards, the entire settlement. The church stands completely empty. He alone serves the liturgy. The people are in the street. Music plays. From them, the archimandrite writes, there is weeping and wailing. He cannot cope. He is alone against the entire city. The people do not listen to him. They ignore the threats. They continue to have fun in their own way, according to old customs. The archimandrite, in despair, begs the king to send military force, soldiers, those who will force the people to obey. You think that the people simply loved holidays, loved fun, did not want to sit in a stuffy church? Okay. Then why did they fiercely defend the jesters? Why did they go out into the streets as a whole city, risking the wrath of the authorities? Who is one of us, and who is an outsider? The people felt. The church and the new authorities are aliens. They are the ones who came and tried to change everything, to impose foreign orders, foreign faith. And the jesters, guslars, storytellers, they are their own, those who remember and keep, those who sing about how it was before. The same picture across the country. Belgorod, people do not go to church. Kashin, the whole city is on the street. Dimitrov, the same. Kostroma, likewise. Ryazan, the churches are empty. A single culture over a vast territory. The same customs, the same songs. And the power begins a war against this culture, methodically, synchronously, ruthlessly, city by city, district by district. They catch the buffoons, they confiscate the instruments, they beat with whips, they exile. And this is where it becomes truly frightening. Because a year after the ban, another edict is issued. The year 1649. The Subordinoye Ulazhenie, a document that changed everything. The introduction of serfdom.
The people officially, legally become property. They can be sold, exchanged, gifted, mortgaged. A person turns into a thing. 2 years in a row, 2 strikes. 1648, destruction of knowledge. 1649, enslavement. Is it a coincidence? Or is it a deliberate sequence? Look at the logic. The first step, to deprive the people of their voice, to destroy the storytellers, to break the chain of knowledge transmission.
there is no one left to sing about free times. No one to tell how it was before. The second step, to deprive the people of knowledge. In one generation, no one remembers the bailarinas. The old people are leaving. The young are forbidden to sing under the threat of whips and exile. Knowledge fades. The people forget that it was different. The third step, deprive the people of movement. Introduce serfdom. Bind people to the land, to the master, to the place. They can no longer leave. They cannot escape. They are bound forever. Try to serf a people that has songs about heroes who lived without masters. It will not work. They will know that their ancestors were free. They will resist. They will demand the rights that their grandfathers had. They will rebel. Therefore, they first erase knowledge. 1648. They beat storytellers with whips. They prohibit singing. The people are stunned, disoriented. They do not understand what is happening. The old world is collapsing, and the new one has not been built yet. And then, a year later, when the people are still in shock, when knowledge begins to fade, they put on chains. 1649. The Swobodne Ulożenie. Serfdom. The people become property, and they can no longer truly resist, because they do not remember that it was different. This is a process, a proven technology of enslavement. To enslave a free people, preparation is needed. It is necessary for them to forget about freedom. 1 year for the cleansing of knowledge, the next year for enslavement. The scheme works flawlessly. But where did this people with such a powerful culture come from? Why did the Gusli sound from the Urals to Europe? Why were the same bailina sung over a vast territory? What state existed here before the arrival of the Romanovs? The Gusli is not a unique, isolated Russian instrument. It has twins throughout Europe and Asia. In Finland, it is the kantele. In Latvia, it is the kokle. In Lithuania, it is the kanklis. In the Balkans, it is the gusle. One instrument, one root name, one playing principle. From Siberia to the Adriatic. How is this possible? Official history tells tales about different peoples, different cultures, different languages, that have never been united, that have developed independently. But then explain, how did one musical instrument with the same root in its name end up with all these supposedly different peoples? Historians begin to mumble about cultural exchange, about trade connections, about borrowings through merchants and travelers. It sounds reasonable, but there is a nuance. Cultural exchange does not give identity. It gives variations. When peoples trade and communicate, they take ideas and adapt them to themselves. Tools change. Names transform. Differences appear. And what do we see here? Everything is the same. One root in the name. One principle of construction. One technique of playing. One cultural role. Everywhere the Gusli player is not just a musician, he is a storyteller, a keeper of history. Epic poems are also remarkably similar in structure across different regions. Heroes may have different names. Details of the plots vary, but the overall structure is the same. A warrior bard, a hero who protects the land and sings of his feats, a common cultural code. This is not an exchange. This is not borrowing. This is the legacy of one system, a single culture that once occupied a colossal space. From the Siberian forests to the Balkan mountains, one tradition, one language of storytellers. So there was a common territory, a united space where people lived by the same laws. They sang the same songs. They played the same instruments. They remembered a common history. One empire, one state. What was it called? Various names in different sources. One of the names that appears on old maps is Tartaria, but the name itself is not important. Names change. Borders shift. What matters is that this empire has been erased, methodically, carefully, completely. They destroyed not only the state, they destroyed the knowledge of it. They rewrote history. They fragmented the territory. They invented new ancestors for new peoples. The destruction of tools is the destruction of knowledge about that state, about the order that existed before the Romanovs, when the people were free, when warriors were the elite and guardians of culture, when the Vetch decided important issues, when the land belonged to the communities. The Romanovs came to power and began to reshape everything. They did not need free warriors. They needed slaves with hoes. They did not need oral history, which remembers a different past. They needed a new history, written by court chroniclers, where Rus was always dark and wild, but the people remembered. And as long as the instruments sounded, as long as the epic tales were sung, knowledge did not fade away. The elders told their grandchildren. The storytellers sang in the squares. The warriors knew their true history. Therefore, the first thing they did was destroy the instruments. They killed the bearers. They erased the very possibility of transmission. And after a few generations, no one remembered. New children were born into slavery and thought it had always been that way, that their ancestors were also slaves, that freedom is a fairy tale, that free heroes are a figment of imagination. Knowledge was erased, history was rewritten, and now it becomes crystal clear where the king's nickname came from.
Alexei Mikhailovich Romanov, the quietist. Under him there were riots, wars, the church schism, executions, uprisings. What silence! But he did not silence people, not the rebels. He silenced sound. 1648, the last year when the music of ancestors resonated throughout the vast country, when crowds gathered in the squares and listened to the storytellers, when knowledge of the past was passed down through songs. After that, silence fell. Not peace and tranquility, but what comes after a pogrom, after a purge, after mass destruction, when the survivors are afraid to speak, when the last bearers of knowledge hide in remote villages, when the youth no longer know the tales. Imagine this picture. Across the vast country, songs fell silent all at once. The squares emptied. The storytellers no longer sang. The old people, who still remembered thousands of lines of epics, left one by one. And the young were forbidden to sing under the threat of whips. The tools burned in the fires. Along with them, knowledge burned. Songs about free times burned. The connection with ancestors burned. The state that existed before burned. The people still tried to resist at first. Kashin went out with the whole town. Belgorod ignored the church. But gradually the resistance was broken. Public floggings worked. Exiles frightened them. The confiscation of the last tools completed the matter. In the villages, the old folks still sang quietly at night for their grandchildren. But these were fragments, snapshots. No one remembered the complete cycles of the Belinus anymore. The melodies were distorted. The words were forgotten. With each generation, less remained. In 100 years, only children's songs were left from the great tradition. Short, primitive, safe. In one generation, the culture was almost completely erased. Only pitiful fragments remained, what historians later called folklore, children's tales, primitive creativity. Yet this was a great tradition.
A system for transmitting historical knowledge. If you still think this is an exaggeration, answer the questions. Why, after 400 years, do we not remember our epics? Why can't the average person name a single bard, not a single complete epic? We have forgotten the names of the old holidays, those that were celebrated for centuries before Christianization. We have forgotten the names of the heroes who did not make it into the edited chronicles. We have forgotten the names of the cities that existed before renaming. We have forgotten how the language of our ancestors sounded, because the language was transmitted through songs, and the songs were forbidden. We have forgotten the geography of our land, the old names of rivers, lakes, and places. They were preserved in oral tradition, handed down through bylines. When the storytellers were destroyed, geography disappeared with them. Now we use new names, invented by the new authorities. Why have Gusli turned into a museum exhibit, into an exotic artifact? Why are children not taught to play an instrument that was the foundation of culture in schools? Because they were exterminated, along with knowledge, along with that culture, along with that state that existed before the Romanovs. We were given a new history. New textbooks were written. New heroes were shown. A new chronology was invented. And we believed, because there were no ones who could sing about a different past. The sound has died. The storytellers are gone forever. The epic tales are forgotten. And a people without songs are a people without knowledge, without roots, without a past. They can be reshaped anew, like clay, given any form, any story, any ancestors, and they will accept it, because they do not remember who they were. The destruction of instruments was not a fight against music. It was not a fight against paganism. It was not a fight against debauchery. It was the destruction of historical knowledge, a complete purge, an operation to erase an entire civilization. A people without knowledge is ideal material. They can be reformatted, rewritten. We live in a world after that cleansing. We walk on the earth where once in every house instruments played, where warriors sang of their feats, where storytellers gathered crowds in the squares and passed on living history. And now, silence. We do not even know exactly what we have lost, because knowledge was erased long before us. The year 1648, spring. Bonfires blazed from Belgorod to Tobolsk. Wood crackled and turned to ash. Along with it burned the knowledge of a millennial culture. Freedom burned. The state that existed before burned. And a year later, on this ashes, a new one was built. Where people are silent, where the church teaches patience and submission, where the king rules with an iron hand, where everyone knows their place and does not dare dream of freedom, where the past is rewritten, where the instruments are declared demonic. The most silent king, not because he is good and gentle, but because he created silence. He made the sound that was remembered fall silent. He made forgotten the songs that had been sung for centuries. He forced the acceptance of a new reality where everything that was before was declared a lie and devilry. We still live in this reality. After the pogrom, the sound has been silenced for 400 years. Knowledge is erased. History is rewritten. The people are enslaved, first physically, then mentally. The operation is complete. The Quiet One has succeeded. He created silence for centuries to come, in which we still exist, not knowing what our true ancestors sang about, not remembering what they were really like, not understanding what was lost when those instruments burned, which took away in the fire the last knowledge of the free times. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to click the bell so you don't miss new investigations. There are still many mysteries and discoveries ahead. We will continue to search for evidence, ask uncomfortable questions, and explore what official science avoids. Because the truth is always nearby. You just have to want to see it.